Street lamps illuminated the quiet corners of Maple Ridge Drive as Master Sergeant Brandon Cole's cab pulled up to his beige colonial-style home. It was 2:47 a.m. on a sticky September morning, and the suburban street was silent as a grave. After 16 months deployed in Afghanistan, all he wanted was to surprise his wife, Michelle, and wrap his arms around her again. He wasn't supposed to return for another 5 weeks. The early homecoming was meant as a gift. Their 11th wedding anniversary was approaching fast. Tucked inside his military duffel bag, next to his service uniform and identification tags, was a platinum bracelet he'd specially ordered from France. The cab driver, an older gentleman named Walter, assisted him with his luggage. "Welcome home, soldier," Walter said, waving off the generous tip Brandon attempted to give him. "Your family must be thrilled you're back." Brandon grinned, imagining Michelle's expression when she discovered him. "They're in the dark about my arrival." "I'm planning to surprise them," he explained. Walter nodded approvingly, climbed back into his vehicle, and disappeared into the darkness. Brandon stood motionless, studying his residence. Something seemed wrong. An unfamiliar vehicle was parked nearby, a black Dodge Charger with darkened windows and aftermarket wheels. Probably belongs to one of the neighbors, he reasoned, though unease settled in his chest. The house sat in darkness except for a dim glow emanating from their bedroom window on the second floor. The exterior light was extinguished, which struck him as odd. Michelle always kept it illuminated after sunset. As he moved closer, he registered other subtle inconsistencies that troubled him. The flower beds, which Michelle had always maintained with care, appeared neglected and wild. Several beer cans cluttered the front steps. Using his house key, Brandon silently entered through the front entrance. The living space carried an unfamiliar scent. Unknown cologne mingled with cannabis smoke. Their anniversary photograph, which had always occupied the entrance table, lay overturned. Then he detected it. Muted sounds drifting down from the upper level. His combat instincts activated automatically. Moving without sound, he deposited his belongings and ascended the staircase. Each footfall measured and noiseless. The sounds intensified. Rhythmic movement, labored breathing, a masculine groan. The master bedroom entrance stood ajar, not completely secured. Amber light leaked through the opening along with the unmistakable sounds of intimacy. Brandon felt reality tilting beneath him, yet his body responded with the controlled precision that had preserved his life in warfare. He pushed the entrance open. The tableau seared itself into his consciousness in fragments. Disheveled bedding, intertwined bodies, his wife's limbs wrapped around an unknown man's torso. Their wedding portrait on the bedside table witnessed everything. Time appeared to freeze. Nobody reacted. Then Michelle shrieked. The man, athletic with braided hair and an elaborate tattoo covering his shoulders, separated and reached for something on the ground. In the amber lamplight, metal reflected. A firearm. If you're still watching, let us know in the comments section. Subscribe and share with loved ones. Brandon's military conditioning took control. In Afghanistan, delayed reaction meant fatality. He crossed the space in 2 strides, seized the man's arm before he could lift the weapon, and delivered his opposite fist into the man's windpipe. The gun scattered across the floor. What transpired next unfolded like a nightmarish vision. Michelle screaming, the man choking but retaliating with force. Fists impacting flesh, bodies grappling on the ground. The firearm slid beneath the bed frame. Blood splattered across cream-colored walls. In the turmoil, Brandon's hand located the gun. The man attacked. 2 gunshots exploded, then complete silence. Michelle Cole stood before her vanity mirror, methodically applying her favorite lipstick. At 31, she still attracted attention wherever she went. Her consistent workout regimen maintained her physique, and she invested considerable effort in her presentation. Today, she'd selected a form-fitting burgundy dress that accentuated her figure. Her phone vibrated on the countertop, a message from Xavier. Counting the hours until tonight. Beautiful. Brandon still wasn't scheduled to return for another 3 weeks. She responded quickly. "Coast is clear. Come after 10. Michelle studied her reflection, attempting to suppress the remorse gnawing at her conscience. She and Brandon had been teenage sweethearts, wed immediately following high school graduation. He enlisted in the military to secure their financial future, and she'd encouraged his choice. But the deployments extended longer, the emotional distance expanded further, and eventually she'd begun experiencing profound isolation. Xavier Davis had entered her world 7 months earlier at the fitness center where she worked as a trainer. He embodied everything Brandon wasn't. Physically present, impulsive, thrilling in a forbidden way. What began as harmless attraction evolved into after-work beverages, then clandestine encounters, and ultimately into something beyond her control. Her phone buzzed again. This time Brandon appeared on video call. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his image pixelated on the display. He appeared exhausted, dust from the Afghan desert still visible on his combat uniform. "Hey," she responded, manufacturing a smile. "How are things?" "Missing you intensely. 5 more weeks seems like an eternity, but listen, our anniversary is approaching. I've arranged something memorable." "Can't wait," she lied, her stomach twisting. They conversed briefly about inconsequential matters. She mentioned work at the fitness center, deliberately omitting any reference to Xavier, who'd become a regular client solely to see her. "I love you," Brandon said before disconnecting. "Stay safe." "Love you too," she replied, the words tasting acidic on her tongue. At the gym that afternoon, her colleague Tamara noticed her distraction. "Girl, you're courting disaster," Tamara cautioned while organizing equipment. "Xavier might be attractive, but he's got a criminal history. And Brandon, that man genuinely loves you." I understand, Sarah sighed, arranging training materials. "It just developed and now I'm in too deep." "Can't stop," Tamara muttered. "You're going to get someone seriously hurt. Mark my words." By nightfall, Michelle had dismissed all considerations of consequences. She'd ordered Brandon's preferred takeout from Tony's Italian kitchen, allowing the delivery person to assume it was for her husband. She replaced the bedding, ignited aromatic candles, and poured 2 glasses of red wine. At 9:45 p.m., Xavier's black Dodge Charger arrived. He entered using the duplicate key she'd provided him the previous month, looking dangerous in dark denim and a fitted navy shirt that displayed his muscular arms. "Damn, baby," he said, drawing her close. "You trying to destroy me in that dress?" They barely reached the bedroom before clothing began disappearing. Xavier had brought marijuana and additional wine. They smoked, drank, made love, talked, and made love again. Hours evaporated in a fog of pleasure and chemical confidence. "Will you ever leave him?" Xavier asked around midnight, drawing patterns on her exposed skin. "It's complicated," she answered. "The house is legally his. My entire existence is connected to his." "I got resources," Xavier said. "Been doing well with my operation." They both understood his operation wasn't entirely legitimate. "Just give me time," she said, kissing him to prevent further questioning. Neither of them heard the taxi arrive outside. Neither noticed the front entrance quietly opening. They were consumed by each other, music playing softly on the wireless speaker, when the bedroom entrance swung wide, and their world detonated. Blood accumulated on the wooden flooring, seeping into the spaces between planks. 2 bodies lay motionless. Xavier face down, 2 bullet wounds in his torso. Michelle collapsed against the wall, struck by a stray round that had passed through Xavier and into her left shoulder. Brandon stood at the room's center, the gun still warm in his grip. His military conditioning had dominated during the confrontation. But now the soldier was receding, leaving only a man staring at the wreckage of his existence. He examined Xavier first. No pulse. Then moved to Michelle, who was conscious but entering shock. "Brandon," she whispered, blood staining her burgundy dress. I'm so sorry." His battlefield medic training engaged. He retrieved towels from the bathroom, applied pressure to her wound. "Don't speak. Help is coming." But he hadn't contacted anyone yet. His phone remained in his duffel bag downstairs. The neighbors must have heard the gunshots. Someone would dial emergency services. Or perhaps not. In this section of Texas, people learned to avoid involvement when they heard gunfire. As though anticipating his thoughts, police sirens wailed in the distance, intensifying. "I didn't intend," Michelle attempted to speak again. "Be quiet," Brandon said softly. "Just be quiet." The sirens ceased outside. Vehicle doors slammed. Flashlight beams swept across the windows. "Police department, open the door." Brandon positioned the gun down carefully and descended the stairs, hands elevated. He opened the front entrance to discover 4 officers with weapons aimed. "Don't move, hands visible." "I'm Master Sergeant Brandon Cole," he stated calmly. "I'm the property owner. There are 2 individuals injured upstairs, 1 deceased. My wife requires medical assistance." They restrained him anyway. Standard protocol. As they escorted him to a patrol vehicle, neighbors emerged from their residences, filming with mobile devices. Mrs. Henderson from the adjacent property stood on her porch in a nightgown, shaking her head sorrowfully. "That poor young man," she muttered. "Fought for his nation just to return home to this nightmare." The subsequent hours passed in a haze of confusion. The detective questioning Brandon at headquarters was a middle-aged Hispanic man named Rodriguez. "Walk me through it once more," Detective Rodriguez instructed, recording equipment on the table between them. Brandon recounted it directly. The unexpected return, the unfamiliar vehicle, the sounds upstairs, the gun beneath the bed, self-defense. His court-appointed attorney, Linda Harrison, insisted the deceased possessed a weapon and an extensive criminal record. "My client is a decorated combat veteran who discovered armed intruders in his residence." "One intruder," Detective Rodriguez corrected. "The other victim was his wife, who facilitated a home invasion by admitting her lover." Linda argued the shooting was justifiable. Michelle underwent surgery to extract the bullet. Her parents arrived, her mother weeping, her father expressionless. They'd never approved of Brandon. They believed their daughter deserved better than a military man. Now they sat in the waiting area, avoiding the news crews assembling outside. By morning, the story dominated headlines. Soldier catches wife with lover. Deadly shooting in North Dallas. Social media exploded with perspectives. He served his country while she served everyone else. Team Brandon. 2 people shot over infidelity. He needs prison. But none of it reached Brandon in his holding cell. He sat immobile, staring at the wall, seeing only the bedroom scene replaying continuously in his mind, questioning when precisely his life had derailed. Was it during his final deployment? Had the warning signs existed all along? The investigation intensified over subsequent weeks. Detectives discovered Brandon wasn't just a victim of infidelity. He'd nearly become a victim of murder. Digital forensics recovered deleted messages from Michelle's phone. Text conversations with Xavier that made Detective Rodriguez's blood run cold. Xavier. When does his life insurance policy mature? Michelle. 2 months after this deployment ends. $750,000 death benefit plus military survivor benefits. Xavier. That's our opportunity. After that, we're set for life. Financial documentation showed Michelle had already spent portions of Brandon's combat pay on gifts, including the custom wheels on Xavier's Charger. She'd also opened additional credit accounts in his name during his deployment. Detective Rodriguez testified about the sophisticated nature of the conspiracy. They had multiple contingencies prepared. Plan A involved arranging an accident during deployment. Plan B involved hired contractors in Afghanistan. They even researched methods to disguise it as Taliban activity. During cross-examination, Michelle's public defender attempted to portray her as a victim of Xavier's manipulation, but the recorded conversations revealed a different narrative. In one video, Michelle was clearly the instigator. "We need to stop discussing and take action. I'm exhausted playing wife every time he video calls. Tired of listening to him discuss our future when I want a future with you." The testimony that struck hardest came from Tamara, Michelle's former colleague from the gym. She had transformed completely, taking extended lunches with Xavier and returning with expensive presents. Once she laughed about Brandon sending her extra money for their anniversary, saying he was essentially financing their dates. The most emotional proceedings occurred when Angela Cole spoke quietly about her son. "Baby, I know this hurts, but God protected you through war for a purpose. He brought you home early for a purpose." Brandon simply nodded, his expression impassive. The only occasion he displayed emotion was during the playback of the surveillance footage from his house cameras. He'd installed them himself for Michelle's protection during his absence. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The footage showed Michelle and Xavier entering the residence multiple times over months, frequently staying overnight. More incriminating were their conversations on the back deck, smoking marijuana and casually discussing murder. "Xavier, it's too risky here. It needs to happen overseas. Things go wrong there constantly." Michelle, "Just ensure it's after the policy activates, and make it clean. He deserves that much at least." In the courtroom, Michelle collapsed during this playback, sobbing loudly until the judge ordered a recess. Her parents, seated distant from Brandon's family, exited the courtroom in tears. The preliminary hearing concluded with Michelle being detained without bail. The judge cited the severity of the charges and called the evidence disturbing and substantial. Meanwhile, Brandon's case moved toward resolution. Given the circumstances, prosecutors offered a plea agreement: plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter, receive a sentence of probation with no additional incarceration. His attorney advised accepting the arrangement, but Brandon appeared uncertain. "If I accept it, I'm acknowledging I did something wrong. Did I? A man enters my house with a gun, conspiring to kill me, and I'm supposed to apologize?" The plea hearing for Brandon Cole occurred on a rainy Thursday morning. The courtroom was filled. Veterans in uniform, church congregation members, family, media. Even some of Michelle's former gym clients came to support him. Judge Patricia Thompson addressed Brandon directly. "Sergeant Cole, before accepting your plea, I want to ensure you comprehend its terms. While the court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances of this case, taking a life remains a grave matter." Brandon stood straight, military bearing evident. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand." The plea agreement was read into the record. Involuntary manslaughter, 4 years probation, mandatory counseling, no contact with Michelle Cole or Xavier Davis's family. Before accepting the plea, Judge Thompson made an unusual statement. The court notes that while the defendant's actions resulted in death, they occurred in response to what evidence shows was an ongoing criminal conspiracy against his life. His service to this country, his clean record, and the unique circumstances warrant judicial mercy. Brandon was fingerprinted one final time and released. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. "Sergeant Cole, do you regret coming home early? Any words for your wife? Will you return to active duty?" He ignored them all, walking to his mother's vehicle with his family, forming a protective circle around him. 3 weeks later, Michelle's trial commenced. She'd rejected all plea offers despite her attorney's counsel. The evidence accumulated daily. Text messages showing her coaching Xavier on Brandon's military schedule. Recordings of calls to offshore banks about transferring funds. Testimony from Xavier's brother about helping fabricate insurance documents. Security footage of them meeting with a known contract killer. The prosecution's closing argument was devastating. "Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't about infidelity. This isn't about a marriage deteriorating. This is about greed. While Sergeant Cole risked his life serving our country, his wife plotted his death. She watched him deploy to war, but planned to ensure he'd never return home. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. Verdict: guilty on all counts. Judge Thompson, presiding over this case as well, showed no leniency at sentencing. Mrs. Cole, you betrayed not just your marriage vows, but fundamental human decency. You conspired to murder a man who served his country honorably, who trusted and provided for you. The court sentenced her to 28 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Michelle's sobs reverberated through the courtroom as she was led away in restraints. Her parents departed without speaking to anyone. The aftermath rippled through North Dallas. Fit Life Gym closed temporarily, then reopened under different management. Tamara started her own training studio, naming it Integrity Fitness. Xavier's auto detailing business was sold off to pay legal settlements. His children from a previous relationship received most of the proceeds. Brandon resigned from the Army, accepting a medical discharge with full benefits. He started counseling at the VA and eventually began speaking to veterans groups about trauma and betrayal. The house where it happened sold quickly below market value. The new owners renovated the master bedroom completely, replacing the blood-stained floors. 1 year later, Brandon sat in his new apartment looking at divorce papers. His hand hesitated over the signature line as memories flooded back. High school prom, their wedding day, all the homecomings and farewells. His phone buzzed, a text from his VA counselor. The group meets at 7:30. You coming? He signed the papers. Outside, Texas continued its endless cycle of renewal. New buildings rose. Old ones fell. People loved, betrayed, healed, and moved on. But in certain quiet moments, in the spaces between heartbeats, the echoes remained. The gunshots on an autumn night. The trust shattered like glass. The soldier who came home too early. The wife who plotted too late. As the years passed, Brandon's life began to resemble something fragile. Pieced together, but never fully whole again. The weight of betrayal still lingered, etched into his every waking moment. Each victory in his recovery felt muted, tarnished by the memory of the woman he had loved, the woman who had betrayed him in the most unimaginable way. There were days when he would find himself in the quiet of his apartment, staring at the walls, wishing he could return to before the war, before the heartache. But life moves on with or without us. He spent nights in therapy, learning to breathe again, learning to trust again, learning that forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for him. He didn't need to forget the pain, he just needed to stop letting it define him. One evening, as Brandon sat alone on his balcony, the wind carrying the distant sounds of the city, he received a call. It was from the VA, an invitation to speak at another veterans group meeting. This time, however, there was a twist. He wasn't just being asked to share his story of survival. This time he was asked to speak about healing, about finding peace after betrayal. He hesitated, but then he remembered something, those quiet moments between heartbeats when the pain felt too heavy to carry. He needed to share. He needed to let others know that even in the deepest of wounds there could be light. He stood before a room full of veterans, his hands trembling but his heart full. I've been to hell and back. And sometimes hell isn't a battlefield. Sometimes it's the person you loved more than anything. But if I can stand here today, it's because I realized I am not the sum of her choices. I'm not the sum of my pain. I am more than what was done to me. And I promise you, so are you. The room fell silent, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was healing. His voice cracked as he spoke, a man still mending but strong enough to share the journey. Life goes on, but it doesn't have to be the same. You can rebuild. You can forgive. You can find peace. And as Brandon stepped down from the stage, he felt it. The weight was still there, but it wasn't as heavy anymore. If you've been touched by this story, please share it with others. Subscribe for more true crime stories that matter.